Well, dude. Would you look at that? Looks like looks like the Korean president has entered the chat. So yeah, we all know the world is waking up to what's really going on here. And it looks like the South Korean president woke up out of bed, saw a video on X, and was like, "Oh, what is this?" And just starts tweeting off about it, not knowing how the world actually works. So yeah, Korea has entered the chat. I'm sure they've known about this, but yeah, the president just decided to just go on a rampage here. So let's get into this video. This is hilarious, and it has to do, of course, with the people in the Middle East. Well, they're not just in the Middle East, they're spread across the world, especially the Western world, in high positions of power.
Turning now to Korea and to the Asian economies. As I said at the end of our interview with Rory, something very interesting is happening in Asia, a full, basically diplomatic break between Korea and Israel. Let's go ahead and put this up here on the screen. Seemingly out of nowhere, the president of Korea quote tweeted a video which said IDF soldiers tortured a Palestinian kid and threw him off a roof. They call themselves the most moral army. The president, again, literally out of nowhere, just says, I need to look into whether this is true. And if so, what measures have been taken? The forced comfort women issue.
I mean, it looks true. If you're watching this video here, there's just a kid. They're reenacting Lion King, it looks like. And who was it? The father is just holding on to the edge here. And Mustafa is just like, yeah, that's not happening. Bye. And kick him off. The way he falls too is so dramatic, like it's fake. But no, it's definitely real. It's definitely real if you know how those people operate.
That we are raising is in no different than the Jewish massacre or wartime killing. So for those who aren't aware in Korean history, comfort women was a major issue and remains a major one for the Korean people for Japanese treatment of Korean women and effective like enslavement and sex slavery during the Second World War. It remains like one of the hottest issues between the two countries and has caused like major even diplomatic problems between them. But clearly,
yeah, Japan was going off in World War II. Japan was going off. They were invading Korea. They were invading China. They were doing experiments on all those people, like literal experiments that kids would think of, like, let's bury this person in dirt and see if they can live. Let's freeze their arm in ice or cryo ice, whatever it's called, and then quickly heat it up and see if their arm something happens, or let's freeze their arm and then shatter it and see if it breaks, like in the Jason movies. Let's infect them with diseases and then see, let's just put venom from this certain snake and inject it into them and see what happens. They were doing all this. The Japanese were doing all this. If anyone deserved to get bombed, as that one, what's his name? I forget his name, that big comedian. He's like, dude, if there's anyone who deserved to be bombed, it was Japan, dude. Yeah, and they would SA all the women as well. Not good.
they have a very raw wound from the Second World War, and they're comparing the treatment and subjugation of Palestinians to how Israel is treating them. Now, the question, though, is that this video is from 2024. So why now? I think we know why. Because their economy has just been decimated, and the president of South Korea is using, again, one of the most sensitive issues in South Korean society to try to turn the people against Israel on this moral ground. Okay?
Yeah, that's kind of shitty. You don't say anything until it starts affecting your economy, since that's an old video.
So how does the Israeli Foreign Ministry respond? Let's put this up here on the screen.
The more you stay home, the less you want to leave. And the more you stay, the heavier everything feels.
The remarks by the president of Korea, including this trivialization.
Oh, here we go. Here we go with Israel's response.
Of the massacre of Jews on the eve of the Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel are unacceptable and warrant strong condemnation. President Lee, for some strange reason, chose to dig up a story from 2024 and to cite a fake account that falsely represented it as a current event. This account, remember, they're not denying any of this, okay?
Yeah, as long as it was 2 years ago, it's okay. As long as whatever horrendous, that's a word, horrendous crime you commit, if it's more than 11 months ago, there's some mystical divine law out there. As long as it's over 11 months ago, 2 years ago especially, it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't mean anything. And they're bringing up that the president trivialized the massacre of Jews on the Holocaust. Did he even talk about that?
Let's
Right,
say,
exactly.
This account is notorious for spreading anti-Israeli disinformation and falsehood about Israel. The event discussed occurred during an operation against terrorists at a time when Israeli soldiers were facing direct and immediate threats to their lives. The event was thoroughly investigated and addressed 2 years ago. Yet, we have not heard a single word from the president about the terrorists who were at the center of this event, nor have we heard a word from the president regarding the recent Iranian and Hezbollah military attacks against terror or Israeli civilians. Mr. President, it is always better to check before
Yeah, the terrorists. The terrorists. Guys, if you do anything illegal, right? Just wait 2 years and it's forgiven. But if you get caught stealing from your local Walmart, just say terrorists and it's okay. Terrorists. Sure. That boy, that little kid hanging off the building with 4 of those soldiers above him, those soldiers were scared for their lives, I'm sure. They had nothing, they couldn't do anything but just smash his fingers with their feet and let him just fall to his death and casually walk away because they're so threatened for their lives.
posting. Okay, so again, note.
Seems
no
like
denial.
a confirmation of the veracity of the video.
No
so
denial. Right, but this is the question. Why now? Why now? Well, again, they're fed up. They can't do this to Trump yet. They may get there if the blockade happens. But with Israel, who they see as one of the precipitators of this conflict, they're like, oh yeah, no, we're done with you. And we're just going to, and this is a radical shift. They've had relations for many years. It hasn't necessarily always been on the best terms. But, you know, at the end of the day, Korea, they don't care that much about Israel. They're a major U.S. of the ally. So if a U.S. wants them to cozy up to Israel, so be it. It is what it is. But now their entire population, remember what? You think we're a phone-addicted society? They're very similar. They're all on social media. They have TikTok and all the.
Yeah, Korea's Korea's basically Asia's America. But yeah, Asia's really hurting right now because Asia gets a lot of its oil from the Strait of Hormuz. And Asia's hurting, especially Southeast Asia. Go watch those videos I made about Southeast Asia.
These other things in South Korea. So they've been watching the same Palestinian videos. So they've got the population. But then you have this war, which has plunged them into economic crises and chaos. Remember, right before all of this, Korea was about to dispatch its own special envoy. Let's put D4 up there on the screen. Their own special envoy appointed by their foreign minister directly to Iran to have bilateral talks with Iran. And basically, I mean, they didn't admit it, but I think they were just going to pay the toll to get all of their oil out of the Straits of Hormuz. They didn't care at this point. Their economy is so deeply reliant. Well, similarly, again, they're furious with Israel for their role in this war, and so they've actually ratcheted up this diplomatic incident. Let's put D3 up there on the screen. This is in response to Israel's response. It's disappointing that you don't even once reflect on the criticisms from people around the world who are suffering and struggling due to your relentless anti-human rights and anti-international law actions. When I am in pain, others feel that pain just as deeply. It's only natural to feel sorry if someone else is suffering because of my needs. It makes me deeply uncomfortable to watch this immense pain and national hardship suddenly befalling our innocent citizens out of the blue like a bolt from the blue. For the sake of universal human rights and the national interests of the Republic of Korea, I must work harder to find things I can do. Israel cannot tolerate President Lee's remark that wartime killings equal Jewish massacre. I mean, this, again, is extraordinary stuff from the president of South Korea, a allied nation whose entire economy was thrown into full chaos. They were already exploring bilateral negotiations, but I think it shows a couple of things. The Palestinian issue is the one that they can easily reach for. They know that it's sympathetic for their population. They're linking their own history, and it's also a deeply, not so subtle shot at the United States here. It's like, we're not taking orders from you whenever it comes to our relationship here with Israel anymore, which I think is very fascinating to watch this.
I think that's highly significant. There's two things.
Yeah, I mean, Korea was essentially like Palestine. throughout all of history, not just World War II, Japan was a terror in that area, that part of the world throughout history. And whenever they did invade Korea, whether it be to get to China, they would do horrible things to them, basically treat them like Palestinians, pretty much. Although I don't really think their president needs to use that angle, like saying we were once like the Palestinians. I just the act alone of what's happening to the Palestinian people should be enough to understand that that's not okay. You don't have to have had experienced it as well, but you still connect to it more since they have experienced that. Well, not the modern day Korean people, of course, but their ancestors.
Things here. Number one, I mean, it's worth noting that, of course, at the height of the Israeli genocide in Gaza, they had nothing to say. But obviously, the entire population of the world effectively has turned against Israel because of what they have seen and the horror that was perpetrated there. So now that Israel has been directly involved in the Iran war, which is plunging the entire world into economic chaos, which is directly damaging dramatically the South Korean economy. Now they can use the moral issue of the way you treat Palestinians to also, push back against Israel at a time when South Koreans are obviously suffering. So there's that. And then the other piece is the U.S. piece. The U.S. has been shown to be relatively weak, weaker than expected. We were humiliated in a lot of ways. And so the threats from Trump and the fear of how he'll respond and that he'll have Israel's back and you can't, break from them because they're our ally and you need to be on board with them no matter what they do. Those threats are not as potent, especially again at a time when you have a genuine national crisis in South Korea because of the energy crunch. So it's both a sign of just how furious they are with Israel and also a sign of comparative weakness from the U.S.
There's a couple of other elements to this too. So the Gulf countries, remember South Korea, because they've been under threat here from the North Koreans, they have a very robust and actually very good defense industry. So a lot of their arms and munitions have been backfilling a lot of the gaps of the U.S. So what's happened is that a lot of these Gulf countries, just reading this yesterday, has been going out and buying a bunch of South Korean weapons, missile interceptors. They have a pretty robust, their own system, which, as I understand it, they're quite sophisticated and they're much cheaper actually than many even U.S. systems. So Israel, though, maybe they were looking in the future to buy some South Korean weapons. I don't know if that's going to happen now. And you also see South Korea with a little bit of its own leverage. They're like, oh, you Gulf countries, you guys want our weapons? Well, maybe we're going to have to cut some deals here on the side. All of this is just displacement of U.S. supremacy role in the region. This country, so I was just reading here, South Korea and Israel, they signed a free trade agreement 6 years ago, right? So these are not nations with any real enmity. They have tech cooperation, COVID. I was looking for Gaza. They urged a ceasefire and humanitarianism, but they were very balanced. They didn't, outward condemnation. This is by far, one of the bigger incidents. Another thing, when we keep our eye on Asia, I spotted this. Nationwide protests in Japan just a couple days ago. This was on Wednesday, that were over 100 locations, over 50,000 people actually took to the streets. It wasn't just about the Iran war, but some of it was. Let's take a listen.
Protest just outside Japan's parliament, and there are thousands of people here. It's really...
Yeah, I made a video on this. Basically, the new prime minister or president of Japan wants to build up their military and export weapons to the Americans and many, many other nations. And their people are very anti-war, and they're protesting, and they want her to resign now because they see that she's too buddy-buddy with Trump, and they don't want to support the war with Iran in any way.
Really rare to see a protest of this size in Tokyo.
イランの人たちには連帯を伝えたいなというふうに思っています。一人じゃないんだよというか、日本にも反対している人がいるんだよっていうことを伝えたいなと思っています。
Protests were held across Japan in over 100 locations. They were planned before Iran and the U.S. agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. Many showed up anyway, though, fearing it won't last and that fighting could restart.
The protesters here are also criticizing the Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and calling on her to step down.
I mean, look, I think it's interesting. Like she said, it's pretty rare. This was not just about Iran. It was also about their own constitution. So look, every nation has domestic politics. I'm not trying to say that it's all about this, but there are signs of interesting things. And the Japanese prime minister, she's in a tough spot. Their government also, I mean, they had all these budget problems. I've been reading a little bit about the first budget that they had to, some 11-year, it's very similar to our Congress, but they're having issues with that. But Iran remains a single problem. They had a call this morning, I was looking, where, they're urging diplomacy and reopening of the Straits of Hormuz. Remember, 70, almost 80% of their oil, and South Korea, very similarly, they also rely heavily on natural gas, and then they have the same problems whenever it comes to jet fuel. All of this, I think, just demonstrates like the way that this war is breaking apart these alliances in Asia. And then it also opens the question about the naval blockade of the Straits of Hormuz. Are we going to board Chinese vessels? And if you're China,
That'd be insane.
I mean, look, China's singular goal with Japan and South Korea has been to separate it from the United States. South Korea made its gamble during the THAAD situation, where China threatened economic boycott, and South Korea said, we got to sit here and we got to take the pain. We got to keep these THAAD missiles here, or in battery and the radar, because at the end of the day, America's our guarantor of security. So even though we're going to take a ton of pain, we got to sit here and we got to take it because it's good for us in the long run. How have we repaid them? By destroying their economy.
Yeah.
Same with Japan. I mean, for them, they're like, look, we have this alliance, occupation, and this painful history, but at the end of the day, like, we have a deep consumer relationship. We're very, very tight. China, their sole goal is to cleave off South Korea and Japan from the US and to actually have them basically have a reverse relationship where they're like, look, we're not going to attack you, but you get access to our consumer market. So it looks like a more appealing pitch than it was in the past. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I don't understand with these countries is, so like with the Middle East, right? Like the Gulf nations, they're allies with Western nations like America, then in part, then Israel. But then they're not allies with other Middle Eastern countries like Iran, like their own people, the Persians, if you go back in ancient times, not allies with them. And then in Asia, you have a mix where countries are allies with China, and then other countries are allies with America. So for example, in Southeast Asia where I'm at, Thailand is kind of more allied with America, and they have American military equipment. But the country I'm in, they're allies with China. And then you have South Korea and Japan who are allies with America. And now that I know about propaganda, they used to say like China's gonna invade, and what he just said, like China's not gonna invade Japan or South Korea. And then I heard that, oh well, if they become friendly with China and allies, that everything that like every company, anything they make. So for example, Samsung is in Korea. If they become allies with China, basically China will take over Samsung and then take out all of the people there and basically copy and paste their brand over it, whatever brand that China wants to do. Yahweh, that's God. It's a brand in China, a big electronic brand called Yahweh. It's similar to that name. There's a lot of electronic brands in China, but that's what was discussed, that if China takes over these countries, they'll basically just steal their companies. I don't even think that'll be true, but you never know. But as they're starting to see now, it's probably more beneficial to become allies with China than it is to remain allies with America. You even just had the Taiwan, I think she's like the person going against the current president or prime minister. She just went to China and she's trying to build relations with China. And she's even saying, why would we be with America? Look at Ukraine. They're just using Ukraine as a proxy, just giving them weapons, but they don't actually help Ukraine, and they just let Ukraine slowly die off. A whole generation of men gone. And then the same thing now with Taiwan. They want to use Taiwan as just a proxy to fend off China. And she's like, no, we're going to go try to be allies with China now. Yeah, but I'm going to end it here for this video, guys. Have anything to say, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.